go over checks and deposits, journal entries, payables, receivable, and all the reports that support them. There is not I'm going to do this more like a webinar style instead of a presentation. There is just, I thought it would go better that way. So there will be a recording on the website, but there will not be like a PowerPoint that goes along with this one.
You probably all know how to do checks and deposits. Do you know the different journal entries? You know what a reversing journal entry is, what a financial or marketing or accrual. You've got a choice when you do a journal entry in that upper right-hand corner. So there's some blank stares on that, so yeah. I think you better.
I did a voided check, and I don't think I did it correct.
Okay.
I voided it, and it says that I voided it, but it doesn't. I don't know if it shows that I actually voided the amount out. So I don't think
Look at...
There's always, with the void, it creates a journal entry that voids it. It doesn't take the actual check out. There's a journal entry that will back the check out.
Did you... And the date, when you void a check, it asks you what date you want it to be voided.
Okay. And I did it the same day.
Okay, good. So if you run a check register, you should have both of those entries in there.
If I do it.
Yeah, I did do webinars, and also the webinars are usually recorded, and they are on the website as well. If you look at any of the older webinars I've done, they're under so the presentations and archives, I think, and there's webinars. Webinar page, and it's the bottom right-hand corner, and there's links to several of the recorded webinars. Okay, so what I really want to start with the basic accounting and basic data entry was some of the setup behind it even, because to make the entries go smoother, you have to have the right setup behind them. And the basis of all entries is, of course, your vendors. So I was going to start with the vendor list and kind of show you your different options here. Without going too much in detail, because I will go into some of these features again in some of the later presentations today. If you look at the vendor screen, though, there's a couple things that you can see right off the bat. And of course, you have the name and the city and the zip, your address there, and you might have a phone number. But these flags are very telling here. If you have a B here, that means they're set for both AP and AR vendor. And the C stands for a credit card vendor. Your other options would be 0 for none, which means that you would not be able to use that vendor for AP or AR, or a credit card vendor. And your vendors, if you don't use them for AP and AR, they don't have to be marked or flagged as anything. But if you do use those modules, then you will want to have those flagged. If you're entering an AP and AR, and you pick a vendor that is not flagged as an AP or an AR vendor, it will warn you, but then if you click OK, you can go ahead and enter to that vendor. The problem is you can't ever pay or receive that payable or receivable. So it's just, if you think you're ever going to use them for payable or receivable, just go ahead and flag them as such or both, so you can use them either way. The next column is your 1099 vendor, and that just means if it's marked with a Y that you have it flagged for 1099, which means that it will be pulled up on the 1099 report at the end of the year when you're trying to run those reports and file your 1099s and 1096s. You can mark a vendor as a 1099 vendor at any point in time, and you don't have to go back and change any entries if you've made to that vendor to make those show up on that report. But here you can quickly see who you have marked and who you do not, and I have 2 vendors here marked as 1099. Then A means active. I would mean inactive. I don't have any inactive vendors on this list. then probably the most important thing is the name. You cannot change anything about this name. It will let you, but if I would edit anything on this vendor name, from making it a capital to a lowercase, or removing a space, or adding a comma, or any change whatsoever, you're going to lose your historical reporting on the vendor. That just means you couldn't run a user-defined report by that vendor and pick up all the entries, because it does not historically go back and change or bring that history forward after you edit the vendor name. So if you want to be able to report by vendor, I just recommend not touching the vendor name ever. Even if you have a misspelling, you need to either leave it and add the new vendor with the correct spelling and then run reports by both vendors, or you need to leave it alone.
You could go back and change.
You could go back and change every entry you've ever done to the vendor as well.
Like you catch it after the first
Yeah.
year, you know, that's not a big deal. The other thing is, it is a big deal with accounts payable and receivable, because in that module, it's not the same vendor. So.
It loses its linking in AP and AR. So if you were going to go to change a vendor name and you went back to edit the AP, you need to go find the payments and make sure you change all those accordingly as well to keep the linking. And then I'd probably even run recover bad data to make sure the linking stays.
And vendors do change names. I mean, companies, you know, are bought out and the name changes. You just need to add another one. You can inactivate the old one, and it won't show up on your list to use, but it's still available for reports.
Yeah.
So that's why the active and inactive. And if you have some vendors that you're no longer using, you know, just make them inactive and they won't show up on that pop-up list. But it's best never delete them if you've done AP or AR.
You will see a couple other options over here for the AP and AR, and these are just basically due dates that work here over here. So you can call, like on the AP, last day for invoicing, especially like on a credit card vendor. Usually your cutoff is always has the 15th to 20th a month, whatever, and then it goes to the next billing cycle. So you can always put 15 or 20, and that's gonna be the last day for invoicing, and so it knows to move the due date up to the next month for anything dated after that. And then your days till due is where you put in your actual due date. So if it's always due on the 12th of the month, you you put the 12 in there. And same on the AR. If all your AR stuff, certain vendor are always due on the 15th, you put a 15 in the days till due, and then that would always populate that due date field for you. The other, yes, I have a question. Yeah.
What's the purpose of the sort key?
I use the sort key all the time.
And I don't ever use a sort key.
I have colleagues in the office who don't, and I do, and it makes the listings really skewed. I don't know what the purpose of this.
Okay. I would recommend in the office to either go one way or the other. Obviously. Cheryl, do you want to say why you use it?
The drill down's faster. I mean, it's going to sort by, I don't put in the whole name, I put in the first 5-6 letters or whatever to sort. And that's the way it's listed. And if you want, like if somebody is going by their first name, last name, if you want to sort it by their last name, then you want to put in starting with their last name. For me, it just makes the drill down list.
So it makes the list really messy when you have some.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I suggest you make an office policy. You either do it or you don't.
It's going to put the ones with the sort key at top
Right.
and the ones without at the bottom. I just haven't gotten the habit of using the sort key, so I've just never really used that field. The other main part of the setup that's going to affect what you see when you put in any entry is, of course, the ledger accounts and the integration types. And I'll pick any of these here. You can see the integration type is the INT type. That doesn't mean internal. That is integration type. And you can see some of mine are blank. Some of them have E1s, J1s, Js. These are really going to affect what shows up on your entry. And here we have type. So let's see if I can pull up. Oh, I didn't like that screen. Hold on. I'm trying to pull up the help menu here, and I'll show you what I mean. And if you're in any part of the program, you hit F1, it brings up your help menu for that section. So here is the types of ledger accounts you have down the, let's see if I can make this screen a little bit bigger. Okay. Down the left-hand first column there, it has types. And then these are the fields you're going to get on your entry, be it a check, deposit, payable, or receivable. So you can see for A standard, you're just going to get a quantity column. Obviously an amount column as well, but an amount columns on all of these. So you have a standard equals a quantity, so you can put in a quantity for that one. B is money borrowed, so you have a due date, a pay date, and an interest rate that will show up that you can populate. Now, it doesn't mean you have to populate all those fields, but they're there if you need them. Livestock purchases, it adds the weight, so you have quantity and weight. Capital livestock purchase, you have the quantity, weight, and expected life. And then on the capital purchase, you have quantity, and then new if it's yes for new, and for no, obviously, and then again the life. G for higher labor gives you all of your Fed, FICA, state, Medicare, and columns. Crop purchase, you get wet and dry quantity and the moisture. K is a unit price, so it will calculate the unit price based on total quantity and total amount, or vice versa. If you put in unit price, it'll calculate total amount based on quantity and unit price. So if you're needing specific information to be stored with your entry, make sure you have the right ledger account type set up.
One more thing, if it's type D, let's,
Okay.
D for description,
That's different. That's
that's the next.
yep. Income balance sheet, yes or no. I don't hardly ever have anybody put anything down for no on this one, but you have the option. And then the integration type, this is how it talks to the different modules within FBS. So 0 is no integration. A, B, C, D, E, and F, G as well, I'm sorry, through G are all crop audit integrated accounts, which means they're going to affect crop audit inventories somewhere based on if you have, obviously chemical purchase is going to affect your chemical inventory and so on and so forth. I, J can be smart breeder or smart feeder. K, L is smart feeder. Well, I guess drugs, medication could be smart breeder as well. But those are all your animal, going to affect animal modules, so feeder or breeder. Then you have M, N, O, and P. And those are, M is for parts inventory, but N is for anything. So it's a description file, which I think is what Cheryl's getting ready to talk about. And that saves a description. So if you type in a description, so you have a ledger account maybe for shop supplies, and you have it set as a description account. So the type would be probably A standard. Your integration type would be N description, and then so if you had soap or towels, you would put that in description. It would save those descriptions, so next time you go in, you could always use the same descriptions for the same type of products you purchased. A little more consistency in your descriptions on stuff like that.
You can run a user-defined report by a description, and so if your description is consistent, you get more.
Yeah, a better report there, yeah. So you can kind of, for example, if you're trying to determine where the best place to buy shop towels was, if you always put shop towels in the description, then you can run that and you can see where you got your best price for the last 6 months and make sure you purchased them there. Or where you got sale, so you can look and see when the best time to buy or something like that might be. Labor pool purchase, I don't know any, I've never used that one. And the asset register, I don't think there's anybody in the room using the asset register. But if you did use the asset register, you have to have certain accounts set to that account type. Integration subtype, this is one that always catches people up. And this is mostly, this is just for crop and smart feeder modules. And your options are always yes, always no, default yes. My theory is always go to default. And what this means is if you have let's use crop sales for example. If you have a crop sales integrated account, it's going to ask you, is this a harvest or is it a straight sale? Harvest means it's going to bring it out of the field, going to create a harvest entry. Sale means it's going to take it out of a bin. If you always pull out of the bin, maybe you want to say always no, always a sale. So always no would mean always a sale, never a harvest. If it's always going to be sold right out of the field, maybe it's going to be two, always yes, always going to be a harvest, never a sale out of a bin. But in my world, it's never cut and dry like that. It always can go either way, so I choose default. So it defaults to one or the other, but I can always change it on the entry. Instead of coming and changing my ledger account type, I can change it right there on the entry screen instead. It makes my life easier, but if you guys are more cut and dry and stuff like that, then whatever works for you. But if you're getting used to the system, I might recommend always doing the defaults to start out with until you get used to using the account and seeing what you're always using, and then you can change to the always no or always yes. I'll kind of show you those examples when we go through here in a minute. Let's see what this one's set to. And I want to make sure I have one that's set both ways so I can show that to you in a minute. Okay. So those are the main things you need to get started. I forgot the most important one though. You can't enter anything in the FBS until you have a bank account set. And I always get that question. How do you add a bank account, or where do I edit my bank accounts? And your bank account is just a ledger account that is set to type M, bank account. You can have multiple bank accounts, that's fine, but you have to have at least one. Usually they fall under asset, but not always. You can also have a liability bank account if you have a line of credit that you write off of. So, it doesn't have to be an asset, but usually it is an asset, but it has to be set as type M for bank account. Okay. And I know everybody knows how to add probably checks and deposits, but we'll go over some of the features here that you may not have been aware of. First is that you can change your bank account up here. It means you're going to pull up anything that has a type M type on it. I have no idea why insurance is set to type M, but it is. You can limit bank accounts to divisions, but it's either all or nothing. So if you have one bank account that crosses two divisions, then you can't set that to divisions, because you can only set a bank account to a division. But if you have a bank account for each division, then you can use that option. And that's under Setup Accounting General Information. Your check number, you can select also for auto check numbering, auto deposit numbering. Again, that's under Setup Accounting General Information. So I'll show that screen really quickly, I guess. So you can check this for auto check numbering, auto deposit numbering. Works great unless you have checks you write through FBS and somebody still has a handwritten checkbook they write off of, then your numberings get off. Also tends to get off if you enter a bunch of electronic payments and you number those like ACH and the date, because it's going to default to the next one in line. So if you're using ACH, it's not going to go to the next numerical one for you. Here's where we have that restrict division to bank division checked. I am going to uncheck that for right now. Okay. Up here in the right-hand corner is where you have cleared entry, print check, or save entry as macro. Mine defaults to cleared entry. You can set in preferences, though, to not default to cleared entry, which means that you wouldn't, if you always write your check and then go back and clear them later, you want it to default to not clear it. You can always uncheck it, but if you continually have to uncheck that box, it gets a little cumbersome, so go to that preference and set that preference up so it does not default to cleared. Printing the check here means as soon as you hit save in the bottom left-hand corner here, it's going to print the check to your printer. If you don't print checks, then you can uncheck that box, obviously. Hitting the print down here in the very bottom does not print a check. This prints a summary of the transaction, but it is not in check format. Just to be aware of that. Then another thing we get questioned a lot is this bank balance. It shows up here, it shows up on the deposits. It can get off occasionally from your true bank balance. This is what we call, got to call it like a quick calculation. From when you start FBS and start this bank account, you put in a starting balance. You add checks. It takes the beginning balance, takes that check off of it. You add a deposit, it adds it back on. It's a total that it keeps, like a running total it keeps here within the add check and deposit screen. But if you ever go and edit a check or delete a check or deposit, then this number will get off because it doesn't actually run through every single transaction in the program to come up with that balance. So it's a quick calculate. If it gets off and it does not match your check register reconciliation balance, then you go into setup accounting ledger account, you find the bank balance, and you type in the correct balance. That does not affect the actual report in any way.
Can you say that again and where you corrected?
Absolutely. It's under setup accounting, ledger accounts, then you find your bank account that you have an issue with. Scroll down here. You can see that balance, that number right here is the same that's on that enter check and deposit screen. So if my balance was not a negative 7,000, it was a positive 10,000, I type in 10,000 and click OK. Save it. I'd have to close out of this check screen and go back into it. Cancel. Exit and go back in to reset it. Now my bank balance is 10,000.
So the clear entry checkbox, you said there's some preferences? Under set preferences?
Utilities set preferences, and then I should be under TA for transaction plus.
And changing this on my YouTube will not change any messages.
The preferences will. Preferences are by company. So it says TA entry is cleared, and I default as yes, so it's always going to default to a check box in there, check mark in that box. So I set it to no and save it. And then it will, the check mark, I won't have to remove that check mark every time I add a check. I think Cheryl mentioned first when we're waiting to get the projector set up, the entry bank account. If you have several bank accounts, but that company usually uses one the most, and you like to default to that one, you can type in the bank account ledger account number here under TA entry bank account, and so it will default to whatever one is listed there. A couple other things here that are helpful is, oh, where is it at? There's one that tells it where it stops at, if it's check number or the date. Layout, pen, skip, check, invoice, date, pay, entry, where is it at? Maybe here. Oh, I'm not finding it. Okay, TA plus input stop at date. Means that if you put a Y in there, it stops the date instead of skipping straight to the vendor. To me, it's more useful to go the date because my date isn't always going to be the entry date that I'm in here. So I have the Y there, so it stops at the date so I can change that date. Otherwise, it's going to go straight to your vendor. So that's another useful one. Trying to see what other ones. There's a lot of very helpful preferences here. So if there's something that's not working like you think it should, or it kind of annoys you, let me know and I might be able to point you to the right preference here.
When you click on a line in there, it will tell you your options at the bottom.
Yeah.
This is pretty small, but is there anything where when you tab through like the entry number, the date, the amount, the vendor, if you tab through all that, you can't shift tab back through the whole thing? Not that, I mean, it's just kind of a...
Yeah, we don't have a preference that does anything for that, but
Alt tabs, that would probably bring you to another. Usually when you tab through something, I can shift tab back to like the vendor, but I can't shift tab. It's not a big deal. I can move my mouse. It's just sometimes
No, I've heard that before from our trust clients, because it seems like the ones that, data entry people, like the trust clients, they like to use their keyboard, not the mouse, and I have had that request before, but we don't have that built in. I was going to show you what I meant by the default to yes and no really quickly. But get down here to, oh, it was up at the top. I guess I'm going to go to deposit screen. Deposits and checks, AP and AR screens all work the same way.
sorry, just kind of stay on the same topic here.
Yeah, sure.
Another issue that kind of, when sometimes, like if we open up a check or an entry that has like a division assigned to it, and we click on like the account number and we tap through, it will automatically change the division.
Based on the bank account that's set up here. If you have if you have your bank account restricted by division, then yes. If for somehow this got clicked on the wrong bank account, and then you come down here, it's going to automatically change the division for
I
you.
don't think we have it set up on check.
Okay. That's the only time I've noticed it doing it, but yeah, if you have an issue with that, please let me know and we'll look into that, because it shouldn't unless you change the bank account up there and you have it restricted by division.
Sarah, we're going to mention the, well, go ahead.
Okay. So this is a sales account, soybean sales. And I had it set to default to no. So you see the very top line here, it came to no first, harvest it. No, I'm not gonna harvest it is what the default is, which means it would come out of a bin instead. But I could always choose yes, and then I do have the option of the storage bin. Whereas if I had chose no, it skips over the storage. I should have skipped over the storage bin. Usually doesn't ask for a storage bin there if you have no, because it's a harvest. So anyway, then it goes down to the project. But you have the option if you have default. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to change that to just a sale. It would only go to no. And you can see then, again, because it was set for a crop sales account, I have all the options for my crop sales, such as the project, the seed type, how many acres, the moisture, the wet quantity, shrink, dry quantity. We do have contracts. This one isn't set up as a contract, but we do have a contract module. So if I had contract module and I had a contract for the vendor that was up in this field, and for the commodity assigned to the center, then I would have a contract number that could come up here. Okay. One thing I didn't mention here is when you have your vendor list here, something that throws people a little bit is you have this check mark to use the vendor list. So if you start typing something in, it's going to try to go. So I had S, it's going to go to Sarah. That's my vendor there. But it doesn't, SE doesn't find anything. I could continue to type in another vendor that isn't on the vendor list. You have to be careful though, because if you hit enter, it's going to take home farm vendor, because that's the next one alphabetically. But I can hit tab, and it will take the vendor I typed in there, instead of having to uncheck vendor list. You can use F9 to toggle vendor list option as well. My function keys aren't working right now, but you can use your mouse to use under the vendor list.
Sarah, put in a vendor that you used recently, and then do the F12 key.
I have one. My function keys half the time don't work, so I don't know if it's not working right.
If you have a vendor and you type in the F12 key, it'll bring up the last entry you had to that vendor. So it'll fill in the ledger count, cost center, division, all the way, whatever you have. And then you can just change the amount. if you need to change the amount.
Yeah, there it goes, worse than that one then. So, it didn't work because I hadn't wrote a deposit from CPS, but I had a check from CPS. I hit F12 and it puts in, then the last one I used is 660.
So it speeds up your entry. It's like a macro. How many of you use a entry macros? Okay, a couple of them do.
If you don't, I'll be covering this a little bit, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but it saves by vendor. So I have one here for check here for vendor Sarah Dixon for that. You'll see it has this H behind it. That is just a customized help menu, which means if I hit F1 while I'm on that screen, it's gonna bring up a little note that I typed in there. So it says used for monthly payroll. But that's what the H means on that one. You don't usually see that. But you can use the macro here. If an amount was saved, you click OK, it's going to change the dollar amount. If you don't have one typed in, if you have a dollar amount typed in, it's going to take whatever was there and try to, by ratios, affect the lines below it. I can also type in an amount here. Maybe. Okay. Changes the dollar amount and changes my ratios down here to make that dollar amount. We're going to skip down to journal entries. We were talking about those a little before. Reversing entry can be very helpful for your end of year, end of quarter adjustments needed. If you don't have Eclipse and you're moving stuff to and from the balance sheet for tax purposes, you might want to use a reversing entry. That means if you put it in on 12/31 of 16, automatically on 1/1 of 17, it's going to take that journal entry out. So it'll reverse it back. So you can still report through 12/31, see the entry on 1/1, that the entry is basically gone. There is an option, and you set a preference up, you can change, it doesn't have to be on the next day of the month. You can change, pick what day you want that to reverse out on, but the default is the next day of the month, or the next day. Talking about the report types up here. Default is tax cash, but you can choose accrual, management, or market value. And then you can see all of our reports have that report type option when you're writing the report. So if you put in a management entry, to maybe do an allocation between an overhead to your production centers, but you only want to show that on a management report, not on your tax report, you would flag it as a management entry here, and then it's only going to show up when you run the management type report on your income statement or balance sheet. Journal entries do not require a vendor. Any kind of other entry does require a vendor. But it's helpful to have a vendor on a journal entry, but you don't have to have one. You'll notice this amount to balance, right now it's a red 0. It must be a green 0 to save an entry. If it's not green, it will not let you save it. So you must offset it somewhere. So if you're moving something from sales, if I'm taking $500 away from my corn sales account, I better pick a place to offset it.
You could also use it if you're transferring funds between bank accounts.
Yeah, you can use it for many things. Bank accounts, savings accounts, divisions, anything like that. So maybe I was going to change it to my Smith Corn Center instead of my unallocated center. It will automatically try to put in the dollar amount to even out the entry on the next line. Amount to balance is 0, so I could save it then. This toggle scanner button you've seen on all the entry screens already so far. That just means if you had scanner interface, you can choose a toggle scanner, and if I hit save and scan, it's going to go ahead and ask me to scan something. I'm going to skip ahead to some of the reporting that you're going to use for your basic entry. The first one is the check register reconciliation report. This is 2 reports in one. It's a check register. If you have this box here, check that says date range, it says check date. That means it's going to list them in the order of the dates on the check like it says. If I uncheck that box, it's gonna list it in date cleared, which means it's a check reconciliation report. When it's a check reconciliation report, at the very bottom, this is what you're balancing to your bank statement to make it match. Your check should match, your deposit's gonna match, and your ending balance should match your bank statement. If you have any uncleared, it's gonna be in this uncleared line, and then this total line should match your handwritten register if you keep a handwritten register. You can see here in the date cleared column, I do have some that have stars in them, which means they have not been cleared. There's two ways you can clear an uncleared check or deposit, and that is to simply right-click on the entry from this report and type in the cleared date right here and hit save. And then refresh, and it will show up as a cleared entry. Your other option is to go to input, clears checks and deposits, pick your date range, pick your bank account. It's gonna come up here to type a date in here as well. I personally use the check register reconciliation report to clear from, not this one. But it's whatever you prefer.
I'm the opposite. I use the other one. Yeah, I do the clear check, and one reason is if a bunch of things clear on the same day, the F3 key repeats the date.
Yeah.
And I find it faster.
It does. The only reason I use this more is because I like to balance my checks and deposits. I don't like to have to go around a second report to do that. So if I'm off, I can tell right away if it's my checks or my deposits that I'm off on to go find the missing entry.
Well, I run the one, then I run this.
Yeah.
And see if I agree, and then I can fix it here.
Yeah. It's personal preference. There's no wrong or right way. It's whatever you're comfortable with, and you can see we have different ways of doing it.
It says that right on the house. It said F3. I mean, it's the blue at the bottom of that screen. And it'll say F3 equals, and it'll have the date that it equals.
Always read the blue lines at the bottom of all the entry screens. They'll give you some hints. They'll give you some hints and tips at the bottom of all of them.
Right.
Some of your other basic reports are your trial balance, income statement, and balance sheet. Income statement and balance sheet run exactly the same. I'll run one of them to show you here. You have the option for columns to include period, year-to-date percent. They're pretty straightforward here. Down here at the bottom, you do have some options to compare it to your life cycle budget. If you have a life cycle budget, you can also compare it between the four accounting methods: the cash, the accrual, the management, and marketing. Each column will be a different option. The most powerful one I find, if you're looking at trends or wanting to see how you've been doing it over some set periods, is option 3. It's period selected. If you're doing a straight income statement, then option 2 might be the best for you. I'll show you the difference here. Period and year to date. You put in your fiscal year, you put in a beginning date and an ending date. So if I was running it through July 31st, I'd use 1/1 and then 07/31/16. Date cash exchanged. Excuse me. Use entries and time period is just when the check, deposit, AP or AR invoice or date is on the actual entry. Option 2 and 3, if you have accounts payable and receivable, goes when the payable and receivable the invoice was paid or received. So when the actual cash exchanged hands. And then you have here your market cash financial options. You can use a definition. If you're not familiar with the definition, that means you can go in and you can arrange your ledger accounts in any order you want. You can take out ledger accounts, you can combine ledger accounts on the same line. Otherwise, it's going to list every single ledger account that has any transactions in it. And those definitions can be set up under setup accounting and then income statement, and there's one for balance sheet as well. But we're going to run for all ledger accounts right now. And you have a basic income statement here, income at top, expense, and then your net income at the bottom. Now it changes a little bit if you want to go by periods. And I'm using option 3. And what happens there is that the labels on the left-hand side kind of change. They don't mean what they say. When you're going by periods, all of a sudden the start of fiscal year is the start date of the period you want to report on. So if I want to report for the month of July, I would type in 0701 2016. It's not gonna let me put anything in beginning date. It's grayed out. My ending date, I'm gonna do 7/31/16. So I'm gonna report for a 1 month period, but I wanna go back and see each month, July through January. So I'm gonna go back 7 months. So I want to print 7 periods. And then what it's gonna do is each column is a period, a 1 month period. And I can look across my months and see how things have trended, if that's something I'm interested in. This is a good screen to show it. If you're not familiar with this, the buttons at the bottom of the screen, there's a lot of options here. You can obviously print the report range. You get to pick what part of the report you want to print. So if I just want to print the income section of this, I would click on last line to print, click the last line of the report that I want to print. So the bottom half of the report turned blue, which means it's not going to print. Only the stuff in black is going to print. I could further narrow that down if I only wanted to print May through July. I would choose calculate font size, and I must do that to select my columns because it calculates how big of a font it needs to print on the page. And then I can either set first column to print if I wanted to go leave out July. And then if I wanted to set last column to print, oh, I didn't take first column to print. It's not like my first column to print there for some reason. But I did select the last column to print as May here. I could change it to that. And again, anything in blue will not print, just the black section here will print. You can see I unchecked calculate font size, so now it's not letting me pick columns, it's only doing my lines. The other option is your printer setup. You can change what printer you're going to print to right here in the report. I could choose my Primo PDF. I could change my font type to anything on the list. I could also change my font size, the gap between columns, if I was letter or landscape, the number of copies I wanted to print. Print double-sided works if your printer has the capability of printing double-sided. If your printer does not have that capability, that doesn't matter what you check there.
How many of you print to a PDF? Because that's really handy because you can email that to anybody.
PDF printers are free. If you
Yes.
go Google free PDF printers, there's plenty out there.
But it's handy for communicating, sending somebody else a copy of that report.
Export, you can click the export button to export, but you can also use F10 and F11 on your keyboard. F10 will send only the selected area, so only the part in black. We'll send it to a clipboard. You can go in Excel, paste it in Excel. F11 will take the whole report, whether it's in blue or black, and send it to the clipboard, and you can paste it in Excel. You can click export here. Choose if you want a text file, HTML, or Excel file. Name it. And then change destination, tell you where you can tell it where you want to save it at. There are graphing options. Too much to go into, but you do have some options here if you wanted to do a little bit of graphing here within the program. Here is the summary. It just summarizes for each period what my total income and total expense was. Balance sheet works the same as the income statement, so I'm not going to show that. And then I'm sure all of you know that, but the trial balance to me is kind of a combination of the income statement and balance sheet. It has like an income statement type at top and then the balance sheet at the bottom. But if you have issues with your balance sheet, the trial balance is a good place to find your issues, just because it will show you the beginning balance and the changes, and sometimes you can tell by that where you're at, where you went wrong at. It does have a net change line here at the bottom. The one thing I will point out in the balance sheet that some people miss is you can put that net change line at the bottom of it. If you check the box to include net change line, it will put a net change line at the very bottom. You do have the option as well for columns on the balance sheet to do option 4, where your assets will be on the left and your equity and liability will be on the right. Makes it more readable to me than just a single column down. We do have this new report here called the Date Cash Exchange Report. If you have an issue with your balance sheets, it will show you when you go out of balance. If I was out of balance, it would have something in this net column here and show me the date that I went out of balance. So I could go look at all my entries on that date and see if I could narrow down what went wrong. We're talking about AP and AR reports because those are some of our basic entries as well. The cash requirement report is very handy if you're having anybody who has to approve payments on APs. Pick the date range you're looking at for due dates. This is by due date. So if I was looking for everything that was due from July to the end of August, I like more concise reports, so I usually don't do all detail. I usually leave that off. But anyway, it'll show me the invoice, the date, the vendor, the description, the total amount, how much has been paid, and when it's due. So if anything had been paid on it, the amount and the amount due maybe wouldn't match anymore. But you can print this and then send it to get approval for payments. We have an AR aging report down here. It's also very handy. I don't know if I have any AR in here, but we have some here. Again, I'll tell you the total due, the current, and then your past, 1 to 30, 30 to 60, 60, 90, and over 90 days due. All these you can always right click in to get to the entries and edit anything that might need to be changed. The last thing I want to mention, and this AP and AR detail reports work the same, so I'm just going to show on the AP side of things. If you're using, I don't have any credit card entries in here, but if you have a credit card vendor, it also lets you put in the actual vendor. So you could select, check this box down here, and then come up here and pick the actual vendors, and it'll run bring up all the entries to the actual vendor that you selected for the credit card. But here, what I really want to point out is this option 7. We call this as an error finding report for AP and AR. It links all your payments with your invoices. I'm going to unselect that. So if I had any payments, the payments will be listed in a line underneath here. So if you're having any issues with linking issues with AP and AR, I recommend running this option 7 report. If you have intercompany reporting, and you do offsetting AP and ARs, I really recommend running this report a little more often, just to keep those net payments and offsetting payments cleaned up. But it will catch any errors. There'd be an orange at the top if I had any errors with linking. Closing the report will fix 90% of the errors. And then if you had any errors, you'd close it and rerun it and then see if those fix themselves.
Sarah, do you have a credit card vendor set up?
Yes.
Show them an entry with the credit card where you put in the actual vendor.
So our credit card vendor, what it is you have certain vendors listed as credit card vendors. So if you put the vendor in and you hit enter, it's going to bring up a second actual vendor line. You can put any vendor in there, you can type it in there. So you can keep your reporting by actual vendor. You can run reports on that. You can't run a user-defined report on the actual vendor unless you look at the long description. It records that actual vendor and the long description for the user-defined report. But you can run AP by actual vendor. So I'm just going to hit that one though. Go into Sarah. Okay, that's fine.
So in order to activate that, you have to have CPS as a credit card.
No, it's not Capital One's a credit card vendor.
In the vendor setup,
Yeah.
you would set up Capital One as a credit card vendor.
Okay, and you can select any vendor then
Yes.
after that? Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, for your actual vendor, you can pick something off the vendor list or you can type one in as well.
Right, it doesn't have to, but you can't, if you type one in.
You can't run an actual vendor on it then.
Right, but it's still showing the long description.
It would still,
on the
yeah.
user-defined report.
But here, even though I put the Capital One, I should be able to then. I run that for actual vendor. Staying on time with the other one, I kind of want to go ahead and switch up again a bit. I went through that quick and I apologize for a delay there. Does anybody have any questions though on anything we went over, or were you hoping to see something I didn't show?
Just one thing real quick, Sarah. We're all the time looking up, press F1 for this, or you plus F4, or you plus F12. Show them where the help is for the function keys.
If you go here, help topics and the FBS hotkeys, you'll get a list of all the hotkeys for the function keys that do different things. They're divided by the section of the program that they affect. So, so like the ones I use a lot, like F4, if you're on a report, will bring up what parameters you're in the report on. But if you're in a data entry field, it'll bring up a calculator for you, which is handy. So you might want to make yourself a little familiar with some of these. There's some really helpful ones in here to keep you from going to your mouse all the time. They are handy. So anything else anybody wants me to look at really quickly or discuss?